Don't cut that patch. The words came from the wounded soldier so softly that Dr. Adrian Cole almost missed them beneath the steady beeping of the monitors. Almost. His trauma shears stopped less than an inch from the faded cloth sewn onto Claire Bennett's jacket. Until that moment, the surgeon had treated it like an inconvenience, another piece of old fabric delaying the work of a crowded emergency room. The patch was black once, though years of sun and rain had turned it charcoal gray. A silver Mustang still showed at its center, its head lowered beneath a broken star, while a crooked line of white thread crossed one corner. Dr. Cole glanced at it and gave a brief, humorless smile. "Let me guess," he said. "Some kind of veteran costume?" Claire did not answer. She stood beside the gurney, with one hand braced against the rail, her breathing slow, her pale face calm beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. She wore no rank, no hospital badge beyond the civilian identification clipped to her pocket, and nothing about her suggested she belonged in a trauma room. Her brown hair had come loose from its tie. Dust marked one sleeve, a thin scrape crossed the back of her hand where the gurney had struck her, while the staff rushed the soldier inside. Through the glass doors behind her, 40 feet across the covered walkway, a bay Mustang named Cinder stood in the therapy courtyard with his ears fixed toward the emergency room. He had not moved since the helicopter landed. The wounded soldier opened his eyes again. Staff Sergeant Luke Mercer had arrived conscious, speaking clearly enough to convince everyone that his condition was stable. Now his voice had narrowed to a breath. His gaze did not settle on the surgeon, the nurses, or the machines surrounding him. It remained on the patch. "I said don't cut it." The room changed. Not dramatically. No one shouted, no alarm sounded. Yet Nurse Emily Parker stopped reaching for the supply tray. A resident looked up from the chart. Even Dr. Cole's expression tightened, as if the soldier had spoken a password he was never supposed to know. Claire lowered her eyes to Luke. For the first time, something passed across her face. Not fear, but recognition held behind years of discipline. Luke's fingers lifted from the blanket and closed weakly around the edge of her sleeve. His thumb found the uneven white stitch crossing the broken star. "That thread," he whispered. "I put it there." Claire's hand tightened on the rail. Outside, Cinder struck one hoof against the concrete. Once, then again. The sound carried through the glass like a distant signal. Dr. Cole looked from the soldier to Claire and back to the patch still caught between the blades of his shears. "Who are you?" he asked. Claire did not raise her voice. She did not look at him. She leaned closer to Luke and said, "Stay with me, Sergeant." Luke's eyes filled with a recognition deeper than memory. "Mustang 6, he breathed. "You came back." 6 hours earlier, Claire Bennett had crossed the eastern pasture before sunrise, with Cinder walking beside her through the silver morning fog. She held the lead rope loosely, allowing several feet of slack between her hand and the Mustang's halter. Cinder did not pull. He followed the rhythm of her steps as if the two of them had traveled that path for years instead of 11 quiet months. Fort Halstead Military Medical Center stood beyond the fence, its windows reflecting the first pale line of daylight over the Colorado foothills. The hospital was already waking. Delivery trucks moved near the service entrance. A maintenance cart hummed across the courtyard. Somewhere beyond the main building, a helicopter engine turned over for a routine inspection. Cinder lifted his head at the sound, but Claire placed one hand against his neck and waited. She did not tug the rope or speak sharply. She breathed in for 4 counts, held for 2, then released the air slowly. Cinder's ears shifted toward her. A moment later, his head lowered again. "That is enough for today," Claire said softly. Her voice carried no command, only certainty. She led him through the gate of the equine therapy yard and checked the latch twice. Then she walked the perimeter, testing every hinge, examining the water trough, and making sure the emergency path remained clear. The routine took less than 10 minutes, but Claire never skipped a step. She inspected the first aid cabinet beside the tack room, counted the sealed bandages, checked the portable oxygen tank, and replaced a flashlight whose beam had begun to fade. The program director had once told her that the hospital maintenance team handled those things. Claire had thanked him and continued checking them herself. Cinder watched from the center of the yard, one rear leg resting lightly, his dark mane moving in the cold breeze. He had been brought to Fort Halstead after state officials removed him from a damaged stretch of public land in western Nevada. 3 trainers had tried to work with him. He had accepted food but refused touch, turning away whenever anyone approached his left side. Claire had entered the round pen without a rope, stood 20 feet away, and waited. She had remained there for nearly an hour without taking a step toward him. In the end, Cinder had crossed the distance himself. Nurse Emily Parker arrived through the side gate carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You know the sun is not technically up yet," she said. Claire accepted 1 cup, but did not drink. Her attention had shifted toward the covered walkway connecting the therapy wing to the hospital. A wheelchair had been left too close to the emergency access doors. She moved it against the wall before answering. "Patients still arrive before sunrise." Emily studied her for a moment. "Most horse specialists do not inspect oxygen tanks." Claire looked toward Cinder. "Most days, nobody needs one." "And on the other days?" Emily asked. Claire finally took a small sip of coffee. The helicopter engine beyond the building grew louder, and Cinder's body became still. Claire's eyes moved automatically toward the sky, measuring direction before the aircraft appeared. "On the other days," she said, "being ready matters." By 8 o'clock, the therapy courtyard had filled with the quiet sounds of another working morning. A retired Army mechanic guided Cinder through a slow circle while Claire walked several feet away, watching the man's shoulders instead of the horse's steps. Each time his breathing shortened, Cinder slowed without being asked. Claire noticed the connection before anyone else did, but she said nothing. She simply adjusted the exercise and gave the patient time to find his balance again. From the covered walkway, Dr. Adrian Cole observed with his arms folded beneath his white coat. He had arrived 10 minutes earlier with a tablet, a schedule, and the expression of a man already certain what his report would say. As chief of trauma surgery, he had been asked to review the equine therapy program before the hospital expanded its funding. He had accepted the assignment with visible reluctance. "So this is the treatment?" he asked when the session ended. Claire helped the patient step away from Cinder before answering. "It is part of it." Dr. Cole looked across the yard. "Walking beside a horse, learning to regulate breathing, rebuild trust, and respond without panic," Claire said. "The horse makes avoidance difficult." The patient gave Cinder one final touch on the neck and left with Nurse Emily Parker. Dr. Cole waited until the gate closed. "I repair damaged bodies," he said. "I prefer results I can measure." Claire removed Cinder's lead rope and checked the Mustang's left foreleg for warmth. "Not every injury shows up on a scan." "That sounds poetic." "It was not meant to." His eyes narrowed slightly. He was accustomed to people defending themselves when he challenged them. Claire did not. She moved with the same calm precision she had shown at sunrise, returning equipment to exact positions and wiping dust from a leather strap before hanging it on the wall. Dr. Cole followed her into the tack room, continuing to review the program on his tablet. "Your file says civilian specialist," he said. "No advanced clinical license, no research appointment, no command experience." Claire placed a folded blanket on a shelf. "The program director hired me to work with the horses and the patients." "That was not my question." "You did not ask one." Emily, standing near the doorway, lowered her coffee cup to hide a smile. Dr. Cole ignored her. His attention shifted to the faded patch sewn high on Claire's canvas jacket. The silver Mustang was nearly worn smooth. The broken star above it had lost several threads, and a crooked white seam crossed the lower corner. He touched the edge of the patch with one finger before Claire stepped back. "Is this supposed to impress the veterans?" he asked. Claire's expression did not change. "No. It looks like something from a military surplus store." Cinder moved inside the adjoining stall, one hoof pressing softly against the floorboards. Claire glanced toward him, then back at the surgeon. It belonged to people who did not come home. Dr. Cole had already turned toward the courtyard, reading a new message on his tablet. "The review begins at noon," he said. "Try to keep the demonstrations practical." He walked away before the final words settled between them. Emily remained in the doorway, watching Claire smooth the patch once with her thumb. "He did not hear you," she said. Claire looked through the open gate toward the hospital roof, where the distant thump of helicopter blades had begun to gather over the foothills. "Most people hear only what they expect," she replied. The helicopter appeared over the western ridge at 10:47, flying lower and faster than the aircraft Claire had heard earlier that morning. Cinder noticed it before anyone in the courtyard. His head rose sharply, his dark eyes fixed on the sky, and every muscle along his neck became still. Claire followed his gaze. The aircraft was approaching the emergency landing pad, not the maintenance area. A second helicopter emerged behind it less than 30 seconds later. Nurse Emily Parker stepped through the therapy wing doors with a radio pressed to her ear. "Training accident in the mountains," she said. "4 soldiers are coming in. 2 more are being taken to another facility." Dr. Cole was already moving toward the hospital. The casual impatience had disappeared from his face. "Clear the covered walkway," he ordered. "No patients, no equipment, and no animals near the emergency route." Claire released the latch to Cinder's stall and guided him into the smaller enclosed paddock beside the therapy barn. The Mustang followed, but he did not take his eyes from the landing pad. The first helicopter descended in a storm of wind and dust. The windows along the therapy wing trembled. Loose hay lifted from the ground and spun against the fence. Cinder stepped sideways once, then planted his feet. Claire stood near his shoulder, breathing slowly, but something in his posture told her the aircraft was not the only thing holding his attention. The emergency doors opened. Hospital staff crossed the pad with wheeled gurneys, while the helicopter crew transferred the wounded soldiers beneath the turning blades. 3 were taken directly inside. The 4th gurney moved more slowly. The soldier lying on it was awake, answering questions, and holding one arm close to his chest. A medic walked beside him, reporting that his vital signs had remained stable during the flight. Dr. Cole glanced at the chart and directed the team toward the secondary trauma room. "He can wait behind the critical cases," he said. As the gurney entered the covered walkway, Cinder turned away from the helicopter. His ears moved forward. His nostrils widened. Then he walked to the paddock fence and stopped directly across from the soldier. Claire watched the Mustang's breathing change. Cinder lowered his head, not in relaxation, but in concentration. One front hoof struck the packed earth 3 times in a slow, even rhythm. The soldier looked toward the sound. For a moment, his eyes met Cinder's through the glass. His expression softened, but his next breath came shorter than the one before it. Claire noticed the slight lift of his left shoulder, the tension in his hand, and the careful way he avoided turning his upper body. "Emily," she said. The nurse paused near the emergency doors. "What is his name?" Emily checked the incoming report. "Staff Sergeant Luke Mercer." Claire repeated the name silently. It meant nothing to her yet, but the damaged edge of his identification tag caught the light as the gurney passed. Cinder struck the ground once more. Claire stepped toward the walkway. "Something is wrong." Emily looked at the soldier, then at the monitors attached to the gurney. "His readings are within range." "For now," Claire said. The doors began to close behind Luke. Cinder pressed closer to the fence, his body quiet except for the rapid movement of his ears. Claire had learned long ago that animals did not understand medical charts, rank, or reassurance. They understood tension, breath, and the truth a body could not hide. She handed Emily the lead rope and moved toward the hospital. "Stay with him," Claire said, glancing back at Cinder. Then she entered the covered walkway as the second helicopter touched down behind her. Claire caught up with the gurney just before it reached the secondary trauma room. Staff Sergeant Luke Mercer was still awake, but the steadiness in his face had begun to slip. A young resident asked him his full name, his unit, and the date. Luke answered correctly, yet each response was shorter than the last. He paused between words as though conserving something no monitor had measured. Claire walked beside the rail without touching it. His left shoulder rose more slowly than his right. His fingers were wrapped around the restraint strap, not from fear, but with the deliberate pressure of a man trying to remain in control. Beneath the collar of his uniform, an old surgical line crossed the upper edge of his chest. Claire looked at the portable monitor. The numbers remained acceptable. The man did not. "How far did he fall?" she asked. The flight medic glanced at her civilian badge. "About 12 feet onto a rocky slope. He stayed conscious. No major changes during transport." "Previous chest injury?" "Not in the report." Luke turned his head toward Claire. The movement cost him more effort than it should have. "Old deployment injury," he said. "Years ago." His identification tags shifted against his uniform. One had a shallow dent along the bottom edge, as if it had once been struck against stone or metal. Claire's eyes stayed there for half a second. A memory moved behind them, distant and incomplete, then disappeared before she could reach it. Dr. Cole entered from the main trauma corridor, pulling on a fresh pair of gloves. "Why is he still in the hallway?" he asked. The resident began summarizing Luke's stable readings. Claire listened, but her attention remained on the spaces between Luke's breaths. They were growing uneven, not dramatically. Not enough to trigger an alarm, just enough to matter. "He needs another assessment before he waits," Claire said. Dr. Cole looked at her as if he had found a piece of barn equipment in the operating wing. "You were told to clear the walkway." His breathing pattern has changed since he left the landing pad. His oxygen level is normal. For now. Luke closed his eyes briefly. His thumb pressed harder into the strap. Claire leaned closer, keeping her voice low. Sergeant Mercer, look at me. His eyes opened. Tell me what hurts when you breathe. Nothing I cannot handle. The answer was automatic. Claire had heard it from soldiers who believed endurance was a form of protection. That was not what I asked. Luke studied her face, surprised by the quiet authority in her tone. Pressure, he admitted. Left side, worse than it was in the helicopter. Dr. Cole checked the monitor again. We have 2 patients in greater need. Claire glanced through the glass doors toward the courtyard. Cinder stood at the fence, motionless except for one ear turned toward the hospital. Pain can be hidden, she said. Breathing cannot. Dr. Cole stepped between her and the gurney. Return to your program, Miss Bennett. Claire did not move. Luke drew another careful breath, and this time his left hand lost its grip on the strap. The monitor continued its calm, steady rhythm. Claire watched his fingers fall open and understood that the machine was telling the truth too slowly. Claire watched Luke's hand fall open and took one step closer to the gurney. Dr. Cole raised a hand, stopping her before she could reach the rail. You are not part of this trauma team, he said. His voice remained controlled, but the warning carried through the room. Return to the therapy wing. Claire looked past him at Luke. The soldier was still conscious, still answering questions, but his chin had begun to lift with every breath. His body was searching for space his lungs could no longer find. His old injury may be changing the way this presents, she said. You need to compare both sides again. Dr. Cole glanced at the resident. We already examined him. Examine him without assuming the first findings are still true. The resident shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Cole's expression hardened. You work with horses, Miss Bennett. I work with trauma patients. Through the glass doors, Cinder struck one hoof against the ground. The sound was faint inside the hospital, but Claire heard it. Luke heard it too. His eyes moved toward the courtyard, and for a moment his breathing slowed. Claire pointed toward him. The horse noticed his distress before the monitor changed. Dr. Cole gave a short, disbelieving breath. You diagnose patients through an animal now? No, Claire said. He noticed the fear. I noticed the breathing. Nurse Emily Parker entered from the hallway, carrying updated intake forms. She stopped when she saw the tension around the gurney. Claire turned to her. His left side is moving less than it was 3 minutes ago. His grip weakened, and he is shortening every answer. Emily immediately looked at Luke instead of the screen. Staff Sergeant Mercer, can you take a deep breath for me? Luke tried. The breath ended halfway. Dr. Cole stepped beside him and repeated the examination with quick, practiced movements. His face did not change, but the silence afterward lasted 1 second too long. Move him into the trauma room, he ordered. The resident released the brake. Claire reached for the rail, but Dr. Cole stopped her again. Not you. He responds when I speak to him. That does not give you medical authority. Luke opened his eyes. Let her stay. The request came out thin and uneven. Dr. Cole looked down at him. Sergeant, we are taking care of you. I know. Luke swallowed carefully. But she sees it. Claire felt something tighten beneath her ribs. The words were familiar, though she could not yet place why. Dr. Cole looked from Luke to Claire's civilian badge, then toward the faded cloth on her shoulder. A horse trainer with an old patch is not joining my trauma team. Claire did not defend the patch. She did not mention the years behind it or the name stitched into its worn edges. She only met his eyes. Then do not let me join. Just listen. For the first time, Dr. Cole hesitated. An alarm sounded from the main trauma bay, drawing the resident toward another patient. The hallway filled with footsteps and clipped voices. Luke's monitor remained steady, but his breathing did not. Dr. Cole pointed toward the doors. Outside, Miss Bennett. Claire stepped back. She had learned long ago that authority could close a door faster than fear ever could. Emily remained beside the gurney, watching her. As the trauma room doors began to swing shut, Claire said one final thing. Check beneath the old surgical line. Emily's eyes sharpened. Dr. Cole heard her but gave no answer. The doors closed between them, leaving Claire alone in the hallway while Cinder waited beyond the glass. His head raced toward the room where the soldier was disappearing. The moment the trauma room doors closed, the monitor inside changed its rhythm. Claire heard the faster tone before anyone called for help. Through the narrow glass panel, she saw Emily move to Luke's left side while Dr. Cole checked the screen. The soldier tried to answer a question, but no sound followed. His chest rose unevenly. His right hand searched for the rail, then stopped halfway. Claire stepped toward the door. A staff member blocked her path. "You need to remain outside." She did not argue. She watched. Emily placed her hand near the old surgical line and looked toward Dr. Cole. He examined the area again, this time slower. His confidence did not disappear, but it narrowed into concentration. Luke's oxygen reading began to fall. The room became louder. Equipment rolled across the floor. A tray struck the edge of a counter with a sharp metallic sound. Dr. Cole gave instructions in a controlled voice, but Claire could see that the first assessment no longer fit what was happening. Beyond the courtyard glass, Cinder moved along the fence until he stood directly across from Luke's room. His ears remained forward, his head lowered. Then he tapped the ground 3 times, paused, and tapped again. Claire looked at the Mustang, then at Luke. The rhythm matched the spaces between the soldiers' attempts to breathe. Emily glanced through the glass and found Claire's eyes. Claire pointed once toward the left side of Luke's upper chest, then traced a short line below her own collarbone. Emily understood. She said something to Dr. Cole and indicated the same location. He shook his head at first, but Luke's next breath ended almost as soon as it began. Dr. Cole checked beneath the old surgical scar. His posture changed. "Bring imaging here," he ordered. "Now." The resident returned with portable equipment. Claire remained outside, counting Luke's breaths through the glass. 1, a long pause. 2, another pause. She had seen that pattern before in places where machines were not available, and help was farther away than anyone wanted to admit. Luke turned his head toward the door. His eyes found her. Claire lifted one hand and held it against the glass. "Stay with the rhythm," she said, though he could not hear her. Outside, Cinder struck the ground once. Luke's gaze shifted toward the courtyard. His next breath came slightly slower. Dr. Cole looked toward Claire, then toward the horse. For the first time that morning, he did not dismiss either of them. The new images appeared on the screen. Emily leaned closer. The resident stopped writing. Dr. Cole stared at the result for 1 silent second, then began giving new instructions. The complication was not where the original report had led them to look. It was hidden near the old injury, altered by scar tissue and masked by the stability of Luke's early readings. Claire had been right. The room moved quickly again, but now with direction. Luke's breathing remained shallow, yet the panic around him eased. Emily opened the door just enough to speak. "He needs to stay awake. He keeps looking for you." Dr. Cole turned from the equipment. His face was tense, his voice quieter than before. "Bring her in." Claire entered without triumph. She moved to Luke's side and placed her hand around his open fingers. "Look at me, Sergeant." His eyes focused with effort. "Count the spaces," she said. "Not the blades, the spaces between them." Somewhere in his memory, a helicopter turned above a place neither of them had named. Luke followed her voice. Outside the glass, Cinder became still. Claire stood beside Luke while the trauma team worked around her. She did not reach for equipment or interfere with Dr. Cole's instructions. She kept one hand around the soldier's fingers and watched the small changes passing across his face. "Stay with my voice," she said. "Do not chase the breath. Let it come to you." Luke focused on her, but his eyes kept drifting toward the courtyard. Cinder remained visible through the glass, his head lowered and his body perfectly still. The Mustang seemed to understand that movement would only add noise. Claire counted slowly. Luke matched her rhythm as closely as he could. Dr. Cole reviewed the new images while Emily monitored the changes on the screen. The old scar tissue shifted the pressure away from the usual area, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Claire looked at Luke's left hand. The fingertips had regained some strength, but the muscles near his wrist still tightened between breaths. "There is another problem," she said. Dr. Cole turned toward her. "We found the complication. You found the one affecting his breathing." She nodded toward Luke's hand. "His grip is returning unevenly, and he keeps turning his head away from the light. Check his neck position before you move him again." The resident looked to Dr. Cole for permission. For a moment, pride and responsibility crossed the surgeon's face at the same time. Responsibility won. "Check it," he ordered. Emily adjusted the support beneath Luke's head while the resident performed a careful assessment. Luke flinched before anyone touched the area Claire had indicated. Doctor, Cole noticed. His expression tightened again, but this time the frustration was not directed at her. Keep his position stable, he said. No unnecessary movement. Claire lowered her voice. Luke, tell me where you were when you learned the breathing count. His eyes moved back to hers. Helicopter, he whispered. Night flight. How many people were with you? He hesitated. 7. Then count for 7. Luke breathed in. He waited. He released the air slowly. The monitor began to settle into a steadier pattern. Emily looked at Claire with open curiosity. Where did you learn that? She asked. Claire did not answer. A technician entered with additional equipment, brushing against Claire's shoulder as he passed. Her jacket caught on the corner of the gurney rail. The fabric pulled upward, exposing the full patch beneath the folded edge of her collar. Under the brighter trauma lights, the details appeared more clearly than they had in the courtyard. The silver Mustang was surrounded by 6 faded marks. The broken star above it had been repaired twice. Across the lower corner ran the crooked white seam Claire had touched earlier that morning. Dr. Cole saw it and paused. The room had grown calmer, and with the immediate danger easing, his earlier skepticism returned in a quieter form. You have good instincts, he said. But that symbol does not give you authority in this room. Claire freed the jacket from the rail and covered the patch with her palm. I never said it did. Dr. Cole looked at the worn cloth, then at Luke's improving readings. Then stop wearing it like a credential. Claire's hand became still. Emily looked down, uncomfortable with the remark. Luke's eyes opened at the sound of Dr. Cole's voice. His gaze moved slowly from the surgeon to Claire's shoulder. The moment he saw the white stitching, his expression changed. Confusion disappeared, recognition took its place. His fingers tightened around Claire's hand, and his next words emerged with more strength than anything he had said since entering the room. Do not cover that. Luke's grip tightened around Claire's hand. Let me see it, he said. His voice was weak, but the request carried a certainty that made Emily stop adjusting the monitor. Claire hesitated. For years, she had learned how to move through rooms without inviting questions. She had worn the patch beneath folded collars, rain jackets, and work vests, not because she wanted anyone to recognize it, but because leaving it behind felt worse. Slowly, she moved her hand away. The faded silver Mustang appeared beneath the trauma lights. Luke stared at the crooked white thread crossing the lower corner. His breathing remained shallow, yet his attention sharpened, as if the room had narrowed to that single line of stitching. Turn your shoulder toward me, he whispered. Dr. Cole stepped closer. Sergeant, conserve your strength. Luke did not look at him. Please. Claire shifted just enough for him to see the entire patch. 6 worn marks circled the Mustang. 5 were nearly colorless. The 6th still held a trace of dark blue beneath the frayed edge. Luke lifted his fingers, but his arm faltered before reaching her sleeve. Claire guided his hand the final few inches. His thumb touched the white seam. A long silence followed. Outside, Cinder stood against the fence, watching through the glass with his ears forward. That stitch, Luke said. It leans left at the bottom. Emily glanced at Claire. Dr. Cole looked from the soldier's hand to the patch. You recognize the design? He asked. Luke gave the smallest shake of his head. Not the design. This one. He traced the uneven thread once. I made that stitch. Claire's expression remained composed, but her fingers went cold around his. The memory returned in fragments, a transport cabin shaking in rough air, a young soldier trying to thread a needle beneath a dim red light, a torn patch resting across his knee while he insisted that every team needed its symbol intact before sunrise. She looked more closely at Luke's face, past the years, the exhaustion, and the strain. His eyes were the same. Northridge extraction, she said quietly. Luke closed his eyes for one breath. You remember. You used medical thread. It was all we had. A faint smile touched his face and vanished. You told me it would not hold. I was wrong. The monitor sounded steadily beside them. No one in the room moved unnecessarily. Dr. Cole's earlier certainty had faded into careful attention. What unit used that patch? He asked. Luke opened his eyes again. He seemed surprised that the surgeon did not know. It was not issued to a unit, he said. They made 6 by hand. Claire lowered her gaze to the faded marks surrounding the Mustang. Emily counted them silently. Dr. Cole did the same. 6 people? Emily asked. Luke nodded once. 6 who went where aircraft could not land and roads did not exist. Claire placed her free hand over the patch, not to hide it now, but to steady the weight beneath it. Luke looked at her with the stunned relief of someone finding a name he had carried alone for years. "We searched for you after that night," he said. "Every record said you were gone." Claire's voice remained low. "Records are not always written for the people who were there." Luke's fingers closed around the stitched corner again. Beyond the glass, Cinder lowered his head and released a slow breath. Luke heard it through the brief quiet. His eyes returned to Claire. "The horse knows you," he said. "He knows when someone is afraid." "And you?" Luke asked. Claire watched the spaces between his breaths. "I know when someone is trying not to be." Dr. Cole looked at the patch one more time. This time, there was no mockery in his face, only a question he was no longer certain he had the right to ask. Luke's eyes remained fixed on Claire, as if the years between them had collapsed into one narrow room. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but no one paid attention to the numbers for several seconds. Dr. Cole stood near the foot of the gurney, no longer looking at the patch as decoration. Emily watched Luke's face, waiting for whatever he had been trying to say since he first saw the white stitching. Luke swallowed, then drew a careful breath. "Mustang 6, he said. The name was barely louder than the air moving through the room, yet it changed everything. The resident stopped writing. Emily's hand became still above the monitor. A technician near the door looked toward Claire with sudden uncertainty. Even Dr. Cole stepped back half a pace. Claire did not react to the silence. She kept her eyes on Luke. "Stay with me," she said. His breathing shortened again. The recognition had pulled too much memory to the surface at once. Claire moved closer, her voice low and measured. "Count the spaces between the rotor blades." Luke's eyes widened. The words reached a place deeper than pain. "I have not heard that in years," he whispered. "Then you remember how it works." Claire lifted one finger. "Do not count the blades. Count the silence between them." Outside the glass, Cinder stood motionless at the fence. The wind from the landing pad lifted his mane, but he did not turn away. Luke looked past Claire toward the courtyard. His chest rose once, slowly. He waited. Then he released the breath. Claire counted with him, not aloud, but through the steady movement of her hand. One space, then another. The room seemed to follow. The monitor settled into a calmer pattern. Emily looked from the screen to Claire. "That phrase was used in the field?" she asked. Luke answered before Claire could. "During night extractions, when the aircraft was close enough to hear but too far away to reach us." His voice remained weak, yet each word came more clearly. "She taught us to breathe between the blades, so panic would not take the air we had left." Dr. Cole studied Claire's face. "You were a medic." Claire adjusted Luke's blanket and checked the movement of his left hand. "I was where I was needed." "That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters right now." Luke gave a faint, tired smile. "She always said that." The resident glanced toward Dr. Cole, uncertain whether to continue with the next assessment. The surgeon nodded. "Proceed." His tone had changed. There was no apology in it yet, but the authority no longer carried dismissal. He moved beside Claire and reviewed Luke's latest readings. "His breathing is improving," he said. "The pressure is responding." Claire looked at Luke's eyes. "He is still fighting the memory." Luke heard her. "North Ridge," he said. The words made Claire's hand pause for less than a second. Dr. Cole noticed. Emily did too. Luke continued. "We thought everyone in Mustang 6 was gone." Claire looked toward Cinder. The Mustang lowered his head as if listening. 5 were, she said. The room became silent again, but this time no one mistook her quietness for emptiness. Luke's fingers found the edge of the patch. "You carried all 6 home." Claire covered his hand with hers. "Not all of us." Dr. Cole looked at the faded marks around the silver horse and finally understood why 5 of them had lost their color. He opened his mouth to speak, but Claire shook her head once. "Later," she said. "He needs the room, not the story." Dr. Cole closed his mouth and nodded. Outside, Cinder released one slow breath. Luke matched it. Luke's breathing steadied, but Claire did not relax. She watched the way his eyes tracked the ceiling lights, then shifted to the slight tension returning in his left hand. "Do not move his head," she said. Dr. Cole looked toward the support beneath Luke's neck. His initial scan did not show instability. The initial scan was taken before the pressure changed, Claire replied. His body has been compensating since the mountain. The resident checked the latest readings. His pulse is improving. That does not explain the weakness in his grip. Claire leaned closer to Luke. Can you feel my fingers? She touched the back of his hand lightly. Yes. Both sides the same? Luke hesitated. Left side feels farther away. Dr. Cole's attention sharpened. He performed a careful assessment, then asked Emily to bring the portable imaging unit closer. There was no argument this time. Claire stepped aside, giving the surgeon room to work, but she remained where Luke could see her. The new images appeared on the screen moments later. Dr. Cole studied them in silence. There is swelling near the old injury, he said. Not severe, but enough to affect the nerves if we move him carelessly. Claire nodded once. That is why his grip changed before the monitor did. Dr. Cole looked at her. How did you see it? He stopped holding the rail with all 4 fingers. Soldiers do not release control unless the body takes it from them. Luke heard her and managed a faint smile. Still watching hands. Hands tell the truth faster than faces, Claire said. The team adjusted his support and prepared him for transfer to a higher level of observation. Dr. Cole gave instructions, then paused beside Claire. You did not perform a procedure, he said quietly. You did not touch the equipment. You only watched. Watching is part of the work. Most people watch the numbers. Numbers speak after the body does. Emily secured the final strap and checked Luke's comfort. His breathing remained slow, and the strength in his left hand no longer faded. For the first time since the helicopters arrived, the room felt controlled rather than merely busy. Luke looked toward Claire's shoulder again. You always did this, he said. You saw the thing everyone else missed. Claire lowered her eyes. Everyone misses something. Not you. Especially me. The answer silenced him. Dr. Cole studied the 5 faded marks around the silver Mustang. He had expected pride from someone linked to a secret unit, perhaps a story polished by years of retelling. Claire offered neither. She checked Luke's blanket, made sure the hallway was clear, and asked Emily to warn the receiving team about the old injury. Her attention remained on what came next, not what had already been revealed. As the gurney began moving, Luke reached for her sleeve. Come with me. Claire walked beside him. Dr. Cole followed on the other side, reviewing the updated chart. At the doors, Luke looked between them. You two finally listening to each other? Dr. Cole answered first. I am learning. Claire glanced at him. There was no satisfaction in her expression, only acknowledgement. Outside the glass, Cinder moved along the fence at the same pace as the gurney until the corridor turned away from the courtyard. His hoofbeats remained calm and even. Luke listened until the sound faded. He knows I'm safe now, he said. Claire kept one hand on the rail. No, she replied softly. He knows you are not alone. By late afternoon, Luke had been moved to a quiet observation room on the 3rd floor, where the windows faced the therapy courtyard and the western ridge beyond it. His condition had stabilized, and the tension in his left hand had begun to ease. Claire stood near the door while Emily adjusted the blinds to keep the sunlight from reaching his eyes. Dr. Cole reviewed the latest report at the foot of the bed. No one mentioned the patch again until Colonel James Whitaker entered the room carrying a sealed gray folder. He was a tall man in his late 50s, with silver at his temples and the measured posture of someone who had spent most of his life entering rooms where people waited for answers. His eyes found Claire before he greeted anyone else. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he looked at the faded Mustang on her shoulder and closed the door behind him. I was told someone used the name Mustang 6, he said. Luke lifted his head slightly. I did, sir. Colonel Whitaker placed the folder on the table. That name has not appeared in an active report for 11 years. Dr. Cole looked toward Claire. Was it a medical unit? The colonel considered the question. Not exactly. Mustang 6 was a combat recovery team. 6 people trained to reach places where aircraft could not land, vehicles could not pass, and standard evacuation plans had already failed. He opened the folder. Most of the pages inside were marked with black lines. Names had been removed. Locations had been reduced to coordinates. Claire remained near the door, her face unreadable. Colonel Whitaker continued. They were not sent to win battles. They were sent to bring people home. Luke looked at Claire's patch. She brought 17 of us out of North Ridge. Claire lowered her eyes. The team did. The colonel turned one page. The final report lists 5 members lost and 1 status unresolved. Dr. Cole looked at Claire. Unresolved? Her evacuation record disappeared with the aircraft log, Whitaker said. By the time anyone corrected it, she had already left the service. Claire looked through the window toward the courtyard. Cinder stood beneath the cottonwood tree, his dark mane moving in the afternoon wind. There was nothing left to correct, she said. Colonel Whitaker reached into the folder and removed an old photograph. 6 figures stood in front of a transport aircraft, their faces blurred by age and glare. Each wore the same patch. He placed the photograph beside Luke. The marks around the Mustang represent the 6 members. Emily studied the patch more closely. Why are 5 faded? Claire touched the worn fabric with 2 fingers. Because this is not the original patch. The room became still. After the last mission, I found pieces of all 6, she said. What remained was sewn together. Luke looked at the crooked white seam. And my stitch held it. Part of it, Claire replied. Colonel Whitaker closed the folder. The records do not show medals. They do not show public recognition. They show 17 survivors and 1 woman who refused to list herself among them. Dr. Cole looked down at the report in his hands. The confidence that had once filled his voice was gone, replaced by something quieter. I thought the patch was a performance, he said. Claire met his eyes. That is why I never explained it. He nodded slowly. No defense followed. No excuse. Outside, Cinder lifted his head toward the window. Claire looked back at him, then at Luke. The past does not need a room, she said. He does. Colonel Whitaker understood. He gathered the folder, leaving only the old photograph on the table. As he reached the door, he paused beside Claire and gave her a small, formal nod. It was not a salute. It was something more careful, offered without display. Claire returned it in the same quiet way. The next morning, sunlight spread across the therapy courtyard in long gold bands, warming the fence rails and the quiet path between the hospital and the barn. Claire arrived before anyone else, as she always did. She checked the gate, the water trough, the emergency cabinet, and the portable oxygen tank. Then she opened Cinder's stall. The Mustang stepped out without hesitation and followed her into the courtyard, his lead rope hanging loose between them. Nothing in Claire's movements suggested that the day before had changed anything. She brushed dust from Cinder's shoulder, examined his left foreleg, and listened to his breathing. Only the missing patch on her jacket revealed that something remained unfinished. Dr. Adrian Cole entered through the covered walkway carrying a small canvas pouch. He had left his white coat inside the hospital. Without it, he looked less like the chief of trauma surgery and more like a tired man who had spent the night reconsidering his own certainty. Claire saw him but continued fastening the gate. He stopped several feet away. The cleaning staff found this in the trauma room, he said. She turned. Dr. Cole opened the pouch and removed the patch. The faded silver Mustang, the broken star, and the crooked white stitch were all intact. Someone had gently cleaned the dust from the fabric without brightening the age from it. He held it with both hands. I asked them not to repair anything. Claire accepted it carefully. Thank you. Dr. Cole looked toward Cinder, who watched him from beside the fence. I was wrong about the program, he said. Claire ran her thumb once over the white seam. You were wrong about more than the program. He lowered his eyes. Yes? No excuse followed. The honesty carried more weight than a longer apology would have. The courtyard doors opened again. Emily pushed Luke outside in a wheelchair, moving slowly over the concrete. His left arm rested in a support, but his color had improved, and his breathing was even. When Cinder saw him, the Mustang lifted his head and walked forward. Emily stopped the chair near the fence. Luke raised his right hand but did not reach. He waited. Cinder crossed the remaining distance and lowered his forehead into Luke's palm. The soldier closed his eyes. He still knows, Luke said. Claire stood beside them. He remembers how you breathed. Luke looked at the patch in her hand. Are you going to wear it again? Claire studied the 6 faded marks. I never stopped carrying it. She attached it to her jacket, pressing each edge flat. Dr. Cole watched without speaking. Then he handed Claire a folder. Inside was a proposal for a new recovery program combining trauma medicine, controlled breathing, physical rehabilitation, and equine therapy. Her name appeared at the top as clinical field advisor. "You do not have to decide today," he said. Claire closed the folder. "I already have patients today." Dr. Cole nodded. This time, he understood the answer. Luke placed his hand over his heart. It was not a formal salute, only a quiet recognition between people who knew what survival cost. Claire returned a small nod. Cinder remained beside him, steady and unafraid. No one applauded. No one called the staff together. The hospital continued waking around them, filled with rolling carts, opening doors, and distant voices. Respect had not arrived with a rank, a file, or a sealed military record. It arrived when they finally understood that Claire's silence had never been emptiness. It had been duty, carried without an audience,